When I was a kid, I didn't think much about fear. Sure, I was scared of the dark, or of monsters under the bed like any other child, but nothing I had ever imagined compared to what really happened in my life. Even now, as an adult, I can't tell this story without my chest tightening. It feels like I'm dragging a piece of my childhood trauma back into the light, and a part of me hates revisiting it. But here it goes. I was 9 years old when my mom, my little sister, and I moved into a small, old house on the edge of town. My dad wasn't in the picture anymore, so it was just the three of us. The house was nothing special. Creaky wooden floors, wallpaper peeling in some places, that faint smell of mildew that never really went away. But to my mom, it was a fresh start. My room was upstairs, right at the end of a short hallway. It had a small window that overlooked the backyard and, most importantly, a big wooden closet built into the wall. The kind of closet with those heavy sliding doors that never quite stayed on their tracks. At first, I loved that closet. It felt like extra space for my toys and books, and I even used to crawl inside it to pretend it was a little fort. But that feeling didn't last long. The first strange thing happened about a week after we moved in. I remember it clearly. It was late at night, maybe close to midnight, and I had been lying in bed staring at the ceiling because I couldn't sleep. The house made so many noises at night. The pipes groaning, the floors settling, the occasional creak that made me think someone was walking around. But this sound was different. It was coming from my closet. At first, it sounded like a soft scrape, like something dragging lightly against the inside wall. I told myself it was just a mouse, or maybe the house shifting, but then the sliding door trembled. Not a lot, just enough to make a faint click against the frame, like someone had nudged it from the inside. I froze. My bed was directly across from the closet, so I had the perfect view of the door in the moonlight coming through my window. I remember pulling the blanket up to my chin and whispering to myself, "Don't move. Don't move. Don't move." The door didn't open all the way. It just shifted open about an inch, leaving a thin black crack in the middle. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear anything else. I wanted to scream for my mom, but I was too scared to make a sound. Eventually, I convinced myself it was nothing. Maybe the track was loose. Maybe I had imagined it. I kept staring at that crack until my eyes grew heavy and I drifted off to sleep. The next morning when I woke up, the closet door was wide open. I swear to you, I never touched it. That was just the beginning. The nights that followed got worse. Almost every night, around the same time, I would hear something moving inside the closet. Sometimes it was shuffling. Sometimes it was a faint knocking, like knuckles tapping against wood. And always, when I looked at the door, it would be open a little wider than it had been before. I tried to tell my mom about it, but she laughed it off. "It's an old house," she said. "Closets creak. Doors don't always stay shut. You're just working yourself up." But I knew it wasn't just the house. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I got out of bed, trembling all over, and walked to the closet. My hands were shaking as I pushed the door open. The closet was dark, the kind of black where you can't even see your own hand in front of your face. I grabbed a flashlight from my nightstand, clicked it on, and shined it inside. Nothing. Just my clothes on hangers, my toys in boxes on the floor. But then, just as I was about to shut the door again, I heard something. A breath. Low, raspy, right against the back wall of the closet. I dropped the flashlight and bolted out of the room, down the hallway, and straight into my mom's bed. She was angry that I'd woken her up, but she let me sleep beside her that night. I never told her about the breath. Somehow, I just knew she wouldn't believe me. After that night with the breath, things in the house didn't just continue. They escalated. I tried to tell myself it was my imagination, that I was just a scared kid in a new place. But the more I tried to ignore it, the more impossible it became. The noises from the closet grew louder, sometimes a scrape like fingernails down the inside of the door, sometimes a dull thud like a fist pressing against wood. And then came the whispering. It started faint, so faint that I wasn't even sure I was hearing it. A slow hiss, words I couldn't make out, leaking from behind the sliding doors. I remember lying in bed, my body stiff, straining my ears in the silence of the night while that voice bled into the room. I could never understand what it said. The syllables twisted together, dry and broken, but I knew one thing for certain. It was saying my name. I'll never forget that night when I woke up, and the closet was already wide open. The moonlight spilled across my floor, and I could see straight into the dark. At first it looked empty. Just the outline of my hanging shirts, a box or two on the floor. But then, in the far back corner, where the light didn't reach, I saw it. A shape. Too tall to be a pile of clothes. Too still to be anything but someone. It was the outline of a man, his shoulders bent, his head lowered so it almost brushed against the ceiling of the closet. I shut my eyes tight, hoping it was just a trick of the light, but when I opened them again, the figure was closer. No sound, no movement that I could see, just closer. That was the first time I screamed so loud my mom came running. She stormed in, turned on the lights, and of course, the closet was empty. She was furious, told me I was having nightmares, told me to stop watching scary cartoons, told me to grow up. But I could see it in her face, the worry, the exhaustion, maybe even the fear, because she started leaving the hallway light on after that. The weeks dragged on, and the man in the closet didn't go away. Sometimes I wouldn't see him, but I always felt him. The air would turn icy, my breath fogging even though it was summer. I'd hear the faint creak of the sliding door shifting open on its own. And at night, when I buried myself under the blankets, I'd hear footsteps crossing my floor, soft, deliberate, pacing back and forth. I never told my little sister. She was only 6, too young to understand, too innocent to carry the weight of what I was dealing with. But one morning she came to me with wide, terrified eyes and whispered, "There's a man in the closet." My blood ran cold. She described him the same way I saw him. Tall, bent, with long arms that nearly touched the floor. His face, she said she couldn't see it. Just a blur. A blank where a face should have been. From then on, she refused to come into my room, and honestly, I couldn't blame her. The worst night came during a thunderstorm. The rain hammered the windows, the thunder shook the house, and I was already on edge when I heard the closet door slam open. Not slide, slam. The sound echoed through my room, louder than the storm outside. I sat up, trembling, and through the flashes of lightning I saw him. The man. This time he wasn't standing in the closet. He was in my room. His frame was massive, his body stretching taller than the doorway, his head tilting unnaturally to the side. His arms dangled like ropes, fingers far too long, nearly brushing the floor as he moved. But the worst part was his face. Or rather, the lack of one. It was smooth, pale, like stretched wax, with no eyes, no mouth, no nose, just skin. And yet somehow, I could feel him looking at me. He took a step forward. The floor groaned. I wanted to scream, but my voice caught in my throat. My body wouldn't move. Another step. And then he crouched. His long limbs bent awkwardly, his faceless head tilting until it was inches from mine. And though he had no mouth, I swear I heard the words, "I've been waiting for you." The voice wasn't out loud. It was inside my head, dry and scraping, like leaves crunching underfoot. That broke me. I screamed so hard I felt my throat tear. My mom and sister came running, but by the time they burst in, the man was gone. The closet door was shut tight. The storm raged on outside, but inside, the room was silent. Silent. Except for me sobbing into my mother's arms. We lived in that house for another year before moving again. To this day, I don't know if the man in the closet was a ghost, a demon, or just some twisted figment of my imagination. But I do know this. I never used that closet again. I kept it shut, nailed it closed, and stacked furniture in front of it until the day we left. And even then, even after we moved, I still couldn't sleep with a closet in the room. Even now, as a grown man, I can't fall asleep if a closet door is open. I'll get up, no matter how tired I am, and shut it tight. Because sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and I let my guard down, I swear I still hear it. The slow scrape of long fingers against wood. The whisper of my name. And I know. He's still waiting. I was about 11 when my mom started letting me stay at the neighborhood playground a little later in the evenings. It was summer, and the sun didn't set until late, so she figured it was safe. The playground was only a block away, surrounded by big oak trees and an old chain-link fence that creaked if you shook it. Most kids went home when it started to get dark, but not me. I liked being alone there. The air was cooler at night, the swings groaned softly in the breeze, and the silence gave me time to think. I guess I felt older, braver, staying out later than the rest. That's when I first saw her. She was sitting on the far end of the swings, her feet not touching the ground, her body perfectly still. I didn't recognize her. I knew most kids in the neighborhood, but not her. She had long black hair that hung over her shoulders and a pale blue dress that looked too thin for the cool night air. What struck me most was how she didn't move at all. The chains of the swing didn't even sway, even though the wind should have pushed them. She just sat there, head slightly bowed, as if she was waiting. I thought maybe she was shy, or maybe new to the neighborhood, so I called out a simple, "Hey!" She didn't answer. I walked a little closer, my sneakers crunching in the gravel, and that's when she lifted her head. Her face was off. Not wrong exactly, but pale. Too pale. Her lips were bluish, and her eyes looked dark, empty. Still, I was a kid. I didn't think about ghosts or anything like that. I thought maybe she was sick, or just weird, so I asked if she wanted to play. She tilted her head slowly, almost mechanically, and whispered something I couldn't make out. The voice was so soft, like the breeze had carried it. I stepped closer, leaning in. That's when I realized she hadn't moved her lips at all. I backed away, unsettled, and ran home. I didn't tell my mom because I thought she'd laugh, but the next evening, when I went back to the playground, she was there again. Same swing, same pale blue dress, same stillness. And that night, I noticed something worse. Her feet weren't touching the ground. And the swing wasn't connected by chains at the top like the others. It just hung there, swaying slightly, as if she were suspended by nothing at all. I froze. My stomach dropped. I couldn't breathe. But I kept coming back. Every night for the rest of that summer I would see her, always there, always watching me. Sometimes her head would tilt to one side, sometimes the other. Sometimes her lips would part just enough to look like she was smiling. And sometimes I'd hear her voice inside my head. Play with me. Stay. Don't go home. I stopped sleeping well. I'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling, afraid that if I closed my eyes, I'd dream of her. And I did. In the dreams, she wasn't sitting on the swing anymore. She was standing at the foot of my bed. Her hair hung wet, like she'd just crawled out of a river. Her dress clung to her body, soaked and dripping. And her skin, it wasn't pale anymore. It was gray, bloated. She never spoke in the dreams. She just stood there, her eyes fixed on me, water pooling at her feet. I'd wake up screaming. My mom thought it was nightmares. She made me stop going to the playground after dark, but it didn't matter. By then it was too late, because she had followed me home. The worst night came at the end of August. I remember it because the cicadas were buzzing so loud outside my window I could barely hear myself think. I had dozed off, finally, but something woke me up. The sound of chains creaking. At first, I thought it was just the swing set outside the playground. But then I realized the sound was coming from inside my room. I sat up slowly, my heart hammering, and in the pale glow of the streetlight through my blinds, I saw her. She was sitting in the corner of my bedroom, on a swing that hadn't been there before. The chains stretched up into the ceiling, vanishing into the plaster, and she swayed back and forth, her black hair covering her face. And then she stopped. Her head snapped up so violently I heard the crack of her neck. Her eyes locked onto mine, black, hollow, endless. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. She slid off the swing without her feet touching the ground and began crawling toward me on all fours, her movements jerky, broken, like a puppet with tangled strings. When she reached the side of my bed, she rose up slowly until her face was inches from mine. Her skin dripped with water that soaked into my blanket, her breath cold and rotten. And then, finally, she spoke. "Now you can never leave me." That broke me. I screamed until my mom burst into the room and flicked on the light. Of course, the swing was gone. The girl was gone. But the blanket beneath me was soaked through, dripping onto the floor. We moved away the next year, and I never saw her again. But sometimes, when I pass by a playground at night, I was about 8 years old when my parents divorced, and my mom moved us into a small 2-bedroom apartment. It wasn't much, but it was what we could afford. My room was on the 2nd floor, and the window faced the parking lot. That window would become the thing I hated most about that apartment. I've never been good at sleeping. Even as a kid, I stayed up late reading comic books with a small lamp on beside me. Most nights were quiet. The occasional car pulling in late, someone walking their dog, kids riding bikes down the sidewalk. But then, one night, I noticed something. A figure standing in the parking lot. He was tall, too tall. He wore a long, dark coat and a wide-brimmed hat that cast a shadow over his face. And even though I was on the 2nd floor, even though there was no way he should have been able to see me clearly from that distance, I knew he was staring directly at me. I froze. He didn't move. He didn't shift his weight. He didn't look around like someone waiting for a ride or a friend. He just stared. I pulled my blinds shut, heart pounding, and tried to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe a neighbor, maybe someone passing through. But when I peeked out again a few minutes later, he was still there. Same spot, same hat, same unshakable stare. And that was only the first night. For 3 nights in a row, he stood there at the exact same time, midnight, never moving, never leaving until the sun came up. On the 4th night, it rained. I thought for sure he wouldn't be there. But when I pulled the blinds open, he was standing in the pouring rain. His coat clung to him, soaked through. Water streamed off the brim of his hat. Still, he didn't move. And even from that distance, I could feel it. his eyes locked on mine. I shut the blinds so hard they rattled. That night, I hid under the blanket, but it didn't help. I could feel him out there, waiting, watching. The next morning, I told my mom. She brushed it off, said maybe it was a neighbor coming home late, or someone who looked taller because of the shadows. She told me not to scare my little sister with stories. But I knew it wasn't just my imagination. And the fifth night proved it. I stayed awake on purpose, determined to see him again. Sure enough, right after midnight, I spotted him. But this time, he wasn't at the far end of the parking lot. He was closer, standing near the staircase that led up to our floor. The brim of his hat was tilted slightly, and even from my window I could see that his head was angled toward me. And then he did something I'll never forget. Slowly, very slowly, he raised one arm. His sleeve slid back just enough to reveal a pale, bony hand. And he pointed directly at me. Not at my window, not at my room, at me. I screamed and ran into my mom's room. She came back with me, pulled open the blinds, and of course, the parking lot was empty. Completely empty.
We told the apartment manager the next day.
He checked the security cameras. No one matching that description showed up on the footage. No tall man in a hat. No stranger lurking in the lot. Nothing. But I know what I saw. And it didn't stop there. A week later, I woke up in the middle of the night to a strange sound. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from my window. I sat up, my chest tight, and there it was. The silhouette of the man in the wide-brimmed hat, standing directly outside my window. That window was on the second floor. There was no balcony, no ledge, nothing he could have stood on. But he was there, close enough that the brim of his hat scraped the glass as he leaned toward me. Tap, tap, tap. His finger dragged slowly across the window, leaving no mark, but the sound cut through me like a knife. I couldn't breathe, couldn't scream. All I could do was stare as he pressed his pale hand against the glass. And then, through the faint reflection, I saw his face. Or maybe I should say, I saw the lack of one. No eyes, no nose, no mouth, just smooth gray skin. But I swear I still felt him smiling. I must have blacked out, because the next thing I remember was my mom shaking me awake in the morning. The blinds were shut tight. The window was locked. But when she pulled the curtains open, there were streaks of water across the outside of the glass. Long, finger-shaped streaks running down. She said it was just from the rain. But it hadn't rained that night. We moved out of that apartment less than a year later. My mom said it was because the rent went up, but I've always wondered if it was because of what I told her. Because after that, I stopped mentioning the man in the wide-brimmed hat. I kept it to myself. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm walking to my car or glancing out a window, I get that same sinking feeling in my gut, the weight of eyes on me. And every once in a while,
Just for a second, I'll see him. Tall, still, hat pulled low, watching me from the dark. And I know he's not done with me yet.